Fired for an act of goodwill? Unbelievable. Sophia, a warm-hearted waitress, offered a simple meal to a hungry stranger, prompting her manager to dismiss her on the spot. Yet destiny had other plans, and soon an unexpected visitor arrived, changing her life forever. Hi everyone. Welcome to Inspiring Stories. Sophia had always found her greatest comfort in the hum of the diner during the breakfast rush. Plates clattered, coffee cups chimed as they were refilled, and the gentle murmur of conversation made each morning feel alive with possibilities. She grew up in Willowbend, a small town known for its shaded streets, sweet-smelling bakeries, and strong sense of community. From the time she was a teenager, she dreamed of working in a place that allowed her to meet people from all walks of life, to listen to their stories and make them feel at home. The Cozy Plate Diner, where she now worked, stood on a corner across from the local park, its neon sign glowing warmly in the early hours. For years, it had been a local favorite. Regulars often lingered over a second cup of coffee just to chat with Sophia, who had a special knack for remembering the details of their lives. She'd ask about a customer's new granddaughter or a neighbor's recent college acceptance letter. Even the cook in the back, a grumpy but lovable fellow named Hank, relied on her cheerful presence to make the workday go smoother. In short, Sophia brought sunshine wherever she went. However, the diner's manager, Mr. Palmer, had grown increasingly preoccupied with the bottom line. He wasn't cruel exactly, but he had a strict understanding of business. Every portion of food needed to be accounted for, every penny justified. He believed that success depended on discipline and control, and he often told the staff that if they slacked, the Cozy Plate would be overtaken by fancy new cafes in neighboring towns. The staff, including Sophia, accepted his rules to some extent, though they still tried to maintain a caring atmosphere for patrons. One crisp autumn morning, just when the leaves had begun to change color, Sophia noticed a newcomer standing outside the diner's window. He was somewhat hidden by the soft glow of early sunlight, but she could make out the weariness in his posture and the hollowness in his eyes. He looked as though he was deciding whether to come in or move on. Sophia had seen people like him before, folks who struggled to find a steady income or a stable place to sleep. She noticed he had worn shoes and carried a small, battered duffel bag. When she opened the door to greet him, he tensed as if bracing for rejection. Instead, Sophia offered a gentle smile and asked if he'd like a warm place to sit. He glanced at her name tag, Sophia, and nodded, clearly uncertain. She guided him to a booth in a back corner where he could rest without feeling all eyes on him. The diner had just opened, so there were only a few patrons inside, a retired teacher sipping her first coffee, and a salesman scanning the newspaper headlines. Sophia handed the stranger a menu. In a low voice, he introduced himself as Everett. She noticed his hands trembled slightly. Whether from hunger or from the chill of the morning air, she couldn't say for sure. "It's okay if you don't have enough to order right now," Sophia said gently. "But while you're here, you can warm up and decide if there's anything you'd like." Everett's gaze traveled over the menu, lingering on the most affordable items, as though he might eventually scrape together enough coins from his pocket. Sophia sensed that what he really needed was a hearty breakfast, something to quell the gnawing hunger that had likely been with him for too long. She stepped back toward the counter, thinking quickly. She didn't have enough in her own purse to cover a lavish meal, but she could manage something modest for him. Before she could overthink, she approached Hank in the kitchen. She explained quietly that the man outside looked like he hadn't eaten in a while. Hank, though gruff, had a soft spot for the underdog. He nodded and said he'd fry up an extra portion of eggs and toast if Sophia wanted to chip in. She had a little change from yesterday's tips and decided it was worth using it to ensure Everett got something filling. Within minutes, a plate of scrambled eggs, toast, and a side of potatoes was ready. Sophia slid it in front of Everett and whispered that it was on the house. His eyes flickered with gratitude and uncertainty. He muttered a soft, "Thank you," as if he could hardly believe anyone would show him such kindness. At that moment, the bell above the diner door jingled and Mr. Palmer stepped in. He noticed Everett immediately. It was part of Mr. Palmer's routine to assess every table, every dish that came out of the kitchen, and especially anything unusual. Spotting a man he didn't recognize in a corner booth, enjoying food that had obviously been prepared without a standard order slip, caught his attention. But for the moment, Mr. Palmer said nothing. He watched. Sophia continued her morning tasks, refilling coffee cups, greeting a few more regulars who wandered in for breakfast before work. She kept an eye on Everett, who was slowly eating each bite as though he wanted to savor every morsel. When the diner grew busier, Sophia's focus was pulled in multiple directions. She took orders from a group of construction workers, answered a customer's question about the soup of the day, and rang up a check for a retired couple. All the while, Mr. Palmer drifted closer to Everett's booth. Eventually, he slid into the seat across from the man, a forced smile on his face. "Morning," Mr. Palmer said. "How's the food?" Everett paused, unsure how to respond to the stern figure in front of him. "It's good, thank you," he said, glancing around nervously. "Did you pay the cashier yet?" Mr. Palmer asked, keeping his voice controlled. Everett shook his head. "She said it was taken care of. I I was hungry and I didn't have much cash." Mr. Palmer's eyes narrowed. He scanned the diner until he spotted Sophia hurrying from the kitchen with a tray of coffee cups. He signaled for her to come over. When she did, he demanded an explanation in a low tone, though not so low that Everett couldn't overhear. With unwavering calm, Sophia explained that she had used her own money to cover a simple breakfast for Everett. She believed that no one in Willow Bend should have to go hungry, especially at the Cozy Plate, a place that prided itself on the small-town warmth. Mr. Palmer, however, saw things differently. He insisted that any food served needed to be run through the register. Even if she paid from her tips, the official record should show every transaction. In that tense moment, other diners began to sense the friction. A hush spread through the tables nearby. Sophia tried to reason with Mr. Palmer, explaining that she wasn't trying to hide anything, and that Everett was clearly in need. Surely the reputation of the Cozy Plate wouldn't suffer from one small gesture of goodwill. But Mr. Palmer cut her off, delivering a stern lecture about how businesses lose money if staff start handing out free meals on their own whims. "This is a job, not a charity," he said, his voice growing louder. Sophia swallowed hard, realizing her next words might make or break her future here. She appealed to him, saying that their diner had always been more than just a place that sold food. It was a gathering spot, a pillar of community. "We can't turn our backs on kindness," she whispered. Mr. Palmer's reaction came swiftly. He declared that if she couldn't follow protocol, she couldn't work under his management. He pulled out a slip of paper from his pocket and scribbled something on it, an official note telling her that her services were no longer required. Shocked, Sophia watched him put the note on the table, as if to cement his decision publicly. Everett looked on in horror, clutching his half-eaten plate. Customers stared, some outraged, some confused. A knot twisted in Sophia's stomach as she realized this was actually happening. She was being fired for helping someone who had no other means. "Get your things," Mr. Palmer said. "You're done here." Quietly, Sophia slipped off her apron, placed it on the counter, and cast a soft, apologetic glance at Everett, who appeared mortified. A few of the regulars tried to object, but Mr. Palmer simply repeated that it was his business and his rules. Sophia took a moment to steady herself before walking out onto the sidewalk. The early sunlight felt different on her skin now that she'd lost her job. She had rent to pay and few savings. Despite the dread settling in the pit of her stomach, her main concern was for Everett, who was left sitting in the diner, possibly feeling like he'd caused trouble. She waited outside, uncertain of what would come next. A few minutes later, Everett slipped out the door, his duffel bag draped over his shoulder. He apologized profusely, tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. "It's not your fault," Sophia insisted, her voice gentle. "Sometimes doing the right thing has consequences." She didn't regret giving him a meal, no matter the cost. Word traveled swiftly through Willow Bend. By midday, half the town seemed to know that Sophia had lost her position at the Cozy Plate. People who had eaten at the diner for years couldn't believe the manager would act so harshly. Folks started murmuring about boycotting the place. Others wondered if they should raise some money to help Sophia get by. News eventually reached Mayor Larkin, a middle-aged woman who prided herself on staying informed about the well-being of Willow Bend citizens. She was known to pop up in unexpected places when issues arose, often stepping in to mediate conflicts or check on local businesses. Learning that a longtime waitress, beloved by many, had been fired for showing compassion was enough to make her set aside her afternoon schedule and head straight to the Cozy Plate. Around 30 minutes after Sophia had left the diner, Mayor Larkin, accompanied by her assistant, strolled inside. She found Mr. Palmer behind the register, looking agitated as a small crowd of onlookers whispered among themselves. The mayor asked him to explain what had happened. Straightening his posture, Mr. Palmer relayed his version, that an employee gave away a free meal, breaking standard procedures. A business, he emphasized, couldn't survive if it allowed staff to hand out freebies. Mayor Larkin listened intently, her expression calm but unreadable. Once he finished, she beckoned Sophia to come inside. Sophia had been loitering near the entrance, uncertain whether to walk away or stay in the hope that reason might prevail. When the mayor called her forward, she stepped in, heart pounding. She explained her side of the story, how she'd simply wanted to help a hungry man who had nowhere else to turn. She pointed out that she had used her own money to cover the cost of the meal. She recounted Everett's humble demeanor, his obvious need, and how she believed they could show him that Willowbend cared about its people. The mayor's gaze flickered with understanding. She asked to speak with Everett as well, but he had already slipped away, too ashamed to linger. One or two customers piped up in support, telling the mayor they'd witnessed Sophia's kindness and Mr. Palmer's overreaction. Tension thickened in the air, but Mr. Palmer clung to the idea that rules are rules. Seeing the emotion in Sophia's eyes and the empathy radiating from the patrons, Mayor Larkin considered how to handle the dilemma. Although she didn't have the legal power to force Mr. Palmer to rehire Sophia, she did have considerable influence in Willowbend. She told Mr. Palmer that the town prided itself on unity and compassion, that many businesses in Willowbend thrived exactly because they cared about their neighbors. Without that spirit, she warned, the Cozy Plate risked losing more than a single waitress. It could lose the trust of the entire community. Mr. Palmer looked rattled. He tried to defend himself by saying a line must be drawn, but the murmurs of disagreement among the diner's patrons grew stronger. One woman voiced that she wouldn't feel comfortable continuing to dine there, knowing that a simple act of kindness was punished so severely. While the situation played out, Sophia stood silently, unsure if there was a path that could mend the heartbreak. Even if Mr. Palmer relented, how could she continue working where compassion was deemed a liability? Mayor Larkin then turned to Sophia with a half-smile. I hear you're one of the friendliest faces in Willowbend, she said. It would be a shame for that kindness to go to waste. She paused as though deciding how to phrase her next thought. The town's small event space on Harvest Lane has been underutilized for a while. I'm planning a community outreach program for people in need, soup kitchens, job fairs, that kind of thing. Would you consider helping me get it off the ground? Stunned by the offer, Sophia swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. If there was one way to keep doing what she loved, taking care of people, it would be through a project like that. She didn't have formal training beyond waitressing, but she had a heart for service, and maybe that was what Willowbend needed most. The mayor exchanged a few more words with Mr. Palmer, who was left standing with a stricken expression as the diner slowly emptied of curious onlookers. Folks left behind quiet condemnation, and one or two people even slipped coins on the counter to pay for Everett's meal, as if to emphasize that generosity is never truly wasted. Over the next few days, Sophia found herself working with the mayor's team to transform the event space into a welcoming hall where hot meals could be served and volunteers could come to offer assistance. She tapped into the network of supportive local residents who had known her for years. The small grocery store donated surplus produce, the local bakery contributed bread and pastries each morning, and a group of teenagers offered to help with setting up tables and chairs. Throughout it all, Sophia kept thinking about Everett, wondering if word would reach him that he could find a meal and perhaps some guidance there. She hoped with every fiber of her being that he would come, that she could tell him he wasn't alone. Meanwhile, the Cozy Plate diner suffered a backlash. Some loyal regulars decided to stay away and protest. Without Sophia's warm presence, the atmosphere felt different, colder. Mr. Palmer tried to run promotions to bring customers back, but the essence that had once made the diner so beloved was missing. A local newspaper ran a small article about how one act of kindness cost Sophia her job and spurred the creation of a community project. Public sympathy for her soared. The new outreach space, which Mayor Larkin named Willowbend Commons, opened its doors on a crisp Saturday morning. Volunteers bustled about, ladling soup, slicing bread, greeting anyone who walked in with a friendly smile. Sophia stood at the entrance urging folks to come inside, whether they needed a meal, job advice, or simply company. To her delight, a small line formed outside, including seniors on fixed incomes, families struggling to make ends meet, and a few individuals experiencing homelessness. Among them was Everett, shuffling nervously, as if unsure he'd be welcome. When Sophia spotted him, her heart leapt. She rushed over and ushered him inside, ensuring he got a seat at a table where friendly volunteers poured him tea and offered him a warm bowl of vegetable soup. Although he still looked tired and worn, there was a light in his eyes that suggested the kindness he'd experienced wasn't forgotten. Day by day, Willowbend Commons became a beacon. People dropped off clothes for those who needed them. Local businesses started sponsoring special events, and once a week, a volunteer nurse offered basic health checkups. Sophia found herself in a position of leadership she never anticipated. She oversaw the schedule, made sure supplies didn't run out, and greeted everyone who came through the doors with genuine warmth. Mayor Larkin, seeing the success of the project, secured additional town grants to keep it running. Through it all, rumors circulated that Mr. Palmer was desperately seeking ways to restore the Cozy Plate's reputation. He reached out to old regulars, apologized for being too strict, and considered new charitable initiatives of his own. Yet it would take time for him to earn back the community's trust. For Sophia, life became busier, but in a fulfilling way. She might not have had her old job title, but she found a calling that went beyond serving breakfast or pouring coffee. She was helping rebuild lives, or at least providing a safe space for people to regain their footing. The entire experience reminded her that doing what is right often comes at a cost, but it's a cost worth bearing if it can create hope in others' hearts. Word spread beyond Willowbend about the outreach center's success, and neighboring towns began contacting the mayor's office to ask how they might replicate it. Some local reporters even interviewed Sophia, curious about the woman who had been fired for giving away a meal, but ended up sparking a larger movement. Whenever they asked if she was angry at Mr. Palmer, Sophia would only say she was thankful things turned out the way they did, because sometimes a door has to close for another, more important one to open. On a brisk evening a few weeks later, just as the sun was setting over Willowbend, Sophia tidied up the last of the soup pots, quietly humming to herself. The volunteers had gone home for the day, and the room was empty except for a few folded chairs. That was when Everett approached her. He looked shy, but he held a small slip of paper in his hand. He told her it was a note from a local employer who was willing to give him part-time work. Everett was grateful to Sophia for not only feeding him, but for guiding him toward people who could help him find a job and a fresh start. Tears pricked Sophia's eyes. She realized this was exactly why she'd taken the risk in the diner that morning, to remind someone they were worthy of care and opportunity. By the time Everett left, Sophia felt an overwhelming sense of peace. She understood that kindness, even if it causes temporary hardship, could result in far greater blessings down the road. And that night, as she locked up Willowbend Commons, she reflected on the way life had changed so drastically in just a few weeks. She had lost her job but found her calling. She had faced humiliation but gained the love and respect of her neighbors. The Cozy Plate Diner might have been the beginning of her journey, but the future lay ahead in helping others discover their own second chances. And that, above all, was worth every risk she had taken.